Laura stood before the two-story house, its Gothic silhouette stark against the gloomy October sky. The lawyer had been clear. The property was now hers, an unexpected inheritance from an aunt she barely knew. Aunt Eleanor, the family eccentric no one mentioned at Sunday dinners. The icy wind tousled her hair as she gazed at the Victorian structure, its windows opaque with the dust of years and wood darkened by age. I just need to catalog everything and prepare it for sale, trying to calm the unease that had grown within her ever since receiving news of the inheritance. The rusty lock resisted, but eventually yielded with a stubborn groan. The door creaked open, echoing through the entrance hall like a mournful greeting. Laura took a deep breath, the air thick with mold, aged wood, and something else. A sweet, decaying scent that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. "What a creepy place," she whispered, her voice swallowed by the immense silence. The hall revealed a grand staircase leading upwards. Furniture draped in white sheets stood around her like ghosts frozen in eternal waiting. Laura switched on her phone's flashlight, creating elongated, distorted shadows that danced on the walls as she moved forward. Each step made the floorboards groan, announcing her presence to every hidden corner. Framed photographs lined the corridor, unfamiliar faces obscured by a fine layer of dust. Laura wiped one clean, revealing the stern face of a middle-aged woman whose piercing eyes seemed to follow her. "Aunt Eleanor, I presume," she murmured, noticing an unsettling resemblance to her own features. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly ahead, a disorienting optical illusion that made Laura question her own fatigue from the journey. Doors lined the corridor, all closed, guarding secrets better left hidden. At the corridor's end, a slightly ajar door emitted a faint sliver of light. Laura hesitated, a chill running down her spine. The sensation of being watched intensified, making her glance repeatedly over her shoulder, only to find emptiness. Slowly, she pushed open the door, revealing a large bedroom, clearly Eleanor's. An antique mirror dominated one wall, covered by a black cloth that appeared oddly pristine amid the dust-covered furniture. Laura approached the mirror, her fingers trembling as she reached for the cloth. An inner voice warned her to leave it covered, but curiosity won. She swiftly pulled it away. The mirror was magnificent, a Baroque piece with elaborate carvings of twisted faces and intricate foliage in a gilded frame. The glass, however, seemed strange, almost liquid, like dark, still water under her flashlight. For a moment, Laura saw only her reflection. Oval face, brown hair, weary green eyes. Then, behind her reflected image, something moved swiftly. Laura spun around, heart racing, but found the room empty. "Just my imagination," she said aloud, hoping her voice might dispel the growing fear. But her words fell heavy, absorbed by the oppressive atmosphere. Turning back, Laura felt a jolt of disorientation. Her reflection stared back at her, unchanged except for one chilling detail. It wasn't blinking. Her eyes widened in terror as the reflection slowly smiled. A smile she wasn't making, revealing unnaturally sharp teeth. Laura screamed, stumbling backward onto a covered chair. Crimson liquid began to trickle down the mirror, flowing like bloody tears. In her horror, Laura could swear she heard distant laughter, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Night had fully enveloped the estate when Laura finally managed to rise from the floor where she'd been curled up since the incident with the mirror. Hours had passed like a feverish blur as she desperately tried to convince herself that it had all been a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and stress from the past weeks. The recent divorce, losing her job, and now this unexpected inheritance that had brought her to this isolated place. "I need to get out of here," she murmured to herself, stumbling toward the bedroom door on trembling legs. To her horror, the door, previously ajar, was now completely closed. Laura turned the knob repeatedly, applying increasing force, but the door refused to budge. She shouted for help, aware of the futility. The nearest property was miles away. "Don't panic," she whispered, forcing herself to breathe deeply. There must be another way out. Moonlight filtered through dusty curtains, casting eerie patterns across the room. Laura avoided looking at the mirror, feeling its presence as though it were alive. With shaking hands, she rummaged through her purse for her cell phone, only to find there was no signal. A faint whisper, nearly imperceptible, began filling the silence. Laura froze, straining her ears. The sound seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, as if the house were breathing around her. Laura! Her name, spoken by a female voice simultaneously familiar and alien, sent chills racing through her veins. Against her will, her eyes were drawn toward the mirror. The glass, previously smeared with red, now displayed cracks radiating from the center to the edges, like a spiderweb. Within the fractures, something stirred. Pale, skeletal hands emerged slowly, fingers unnaturally elongated, gripping the golden frame. "Laura, you've been here before." The distorted voice seemed to originate from within the mirror, echoing through the room like a sonic wave. "No, I've never been here," Laura screamed, hurling a paperweight at the mirror. The object passed through the glass as if it were water, disappearing on the other side. The skeletal hands momentarily retreated, only to return more numerous, extending outward from the frame toward her. Laura rushed to the window, desperately attempting to open it, but the bolts were rusted shut, fused by time. In mounting desperation, she grabbed a chair covered in cloth and threw it at the window. The glass didn't shatter. The impact was absorbed as if the window were made of rubber. A guttural laugh echoed around the room, coming from every corner at once. Laura realized with dread that the room was changing. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting like massive lungs. The torn wallpaper patterns twisted into grotesque faces, watching her with hollow eyes. In the room's corner, Laura spotted a small door she hadn't noticed before. Without hesitation, she bolted toward it, tripping over furniture that appeared to shift deliberately into her path. The door opened onto a steep staircase descending into darkness. The basement. Laura hesitated for only a moment before the sound of nails scratching the floorboards behind her spurred her decision. Using the faint glow of her cell phone as illumination, she descended the rotting steps that groaned under her weight. The basement was vast and cavernous, with wooden pillars supporting a low ceiling. The packed dirt floor was damp, and the smell of decay hung heavily in the air. Stacked boxes and broken furniture formed a maze of shadows. Laura moved cautiously, desperately searching for any possible exit. Then, in the farthest corner, she saw another mirror, identical to the one in the bedroom, but with cracked glass already present. Something writhed behind the fractures, crawling with erratic movements. "Laura, you always return," the voice whispered, closer now. With her heart pounding furiously, Laura stepped backward, only to feel something cold touch her neck. Turning slowly, she saw the shadows behind her coalesce into a vaguely human figure, a female silhouette with eyes glowing like embers in the darkness. "Welcome back home, niece." Laura's scream died in her throat as the silhouette dissolved like smoke before she could touch it. The temperature in the basement plummeted, her breath forming clouds in the chilling air. The walls seemed to pulse, mirroring a heartbeat, pumping something dark through the structure of the house. She tried to orient herself, but the basement's geography had shifted. Paths that hadn't existed before now opened among the piles of debris, while others closed off entirely. It was as if the space around her was continually rewriting itself. "This isn't real," she repeated like a mantra. "It can't be real." A metallic scraping noise grabbed her attention. Something was being dragged across the dirt floor. Following the sound, Laura entered an open area of the basement where dozens of mirrors, varying in size and shape, stood arranged in a circle, all covered by identical black cloths. At the circle's center lay an ancient book open on a stone pedestal. Cautiously approaching, Laura saw yellowed pages filled with intricate diagrams and text in a language she didn't recognize. Certain passages, however, were underlined in red, translated in the margins with delicate handwriting she recognized from the occasional letters Aunt Eleanor had sent. "The mirror is not merely an object, but a portal. Those who gaze deeply find not only themselves but all who have come before." A chill of realization ran through Laura as she lifted her gaze toward the covered mirrors surrounding her. Slowly, one by one, the black cloths began to slide off as though pulled by invisible hands. Each mirror revealed not her current reflection but different versions of herself. Some younger, others older, some dressed in clothes from bygone eras. All were dead, each in a horrific way. One had a rope around her neck, another had a chest riddled with stab wounds, yet another stared with empty eye sockets. "You are next," all the reflections said in unison, their voices merging into a terrible cacophony reverberating through the basement. Laura felt her legs buckle, dropping to her knees at the circle's center. The book's pages began turning on their own, driven by an invisible breeze, stopping at an illustration of a woman split in two, half inside a mirror, half out. "What do you want from me?" Laura screamed at the mirrors, at the house, at anything that might be listening. The sound of shattering glass filled the air. The largest, most ornate mirror cracked down the center. A figure began to emerge from within, identical to Laura in every physical detail, except its eyes were black voids without iris or sclera, and its grin stretched grotesquely beyond human limits, tearing into its cheeks with malevolent delight. The creature extended pale, elongated fingers, opening and closing anxiously. "I want what's rightfully mine," the entity said, its voice a distorted echo of Laura's own, as if spoken through liquid. A body, a life, freedom. With mounting horror, Laura grasped the truth. She hadn't inherited the house. The house had inherited her. Or, more precisely, whatever lived within the house, within the mirrors, had claimed her. "You're not real," she whispered, backing away. "I'm as real as you," the creature replied. "Perhaps older, certainly more patient. We're connected, you and I. Blood of the same blood." Eleanor understood this in the end, as did all the others before her. The creature's fingers touched the basement floor, leaving scorched marks. Its body remained partially trapped inside the mirror, as if struggling through a resistant membrane. "I only need a replacement," continued the entity. "Someone to take my place inside while I walk once more beneath the sun. It's a fair exchange, isn't it? After all, you're my reflection just as much as I am yours." Laura frantically searched for an escape route. It was then she noticed a pattern among the mirrors. Each showed a dead version of herself, except for one. A small hand mirror at the opposite end of the circle showed only darkness. With desperate urgency, Laura sprinted toward that mirror, feeling the creature's cold fingers brush her ankle as she ran. She grabbed the small mirror and lifted it, seeing not her reflection but a dark corridor that seemed to lead out of the basement. "No!" roared the creature, nearly fully emerged from the largest mirror. "You don't understand what you're doing." But Laura understood enough. With all her strength, she hurled the mirror to the ground. It shattered into hundreds of glittering fragments. The scream that followed wasn't human. It was a primal cry of rage and agony that shook the foundations of the house. One by one, every mirror in the circle began to crack, releasing a bluish light that flooded the basement. An absolute silence settled over the basement. The creature had vanished, along with all the shattered mirrors. Laura stood motionless, barely daring to breathe, afraid that even the slightest movement could disturb the fragile peace that had settled. Slowly, she stood up. Her legs trembled, and small cuts on her arms, caused by glass shards, stung slightly. The book on the pedestal had turned to ash, leaving only its partially intact leather cover, faded golden letters reading, "Blackwood Genealogy." A faint light began to filter through the basement's tiny windows. The dawn was approaching. Her heart still racing, Laura found the staircase that would lead her back upstairs, determined to escape that cursed place as quickly as possible. The steps creaked under her feet as she climbed cautiously. The door opened easily this time, revealing not the room with the mirror but the mansion's entrance hall. Morning light poured through high windows, illuminating dust particles dancing lazily in the air. The house felt different in daylight, smaller, ordinary, less threatening. The furniture was still covered in white sheets, and the musty smell lingered, but there was no trace of the supernatural horror she'd experienced overnight. "It was just a nightmare," Laura whispered, desperately wanting to believe it. Stress and exhaustion, nothing more. She approached the front door, which opened without resistance. Fresh morning air filled her lungs like a blessing. Laura descended the porch steps, feeling the dew dampening her shoes as she crossed the neglected garden toward her car. She stopped. Something was wrong with the vehicle. It was the same model, the same color, yet she couldn't remember a crack in the windshield. Drawing closer, she noticed the license plates were different. A movement in the second-floor window caught her attention. For an instant, Laura glimpsed a face watching her. Her own face, but with a smile she would never wear. Realization struck her like a punch to the gut. The handheld mirror, the only one that had shown darkness rather than her death, hadn't been an exit. It had been another entrance. By breaking it, she hadn't destroyed the creature. She'd unleashed something even worse. She glanced at her hands, noticing for the first time tiny translucent scales covering patches of her skin, shimmering softly under the sunlight like fragments of glass. "You could never destroy me," whispered a voice inside her head. Her own voice, yet older, wiser, heavy with the weight of centuries. "We are one now." Laura tried to scream, but no sound emerged. Her body moved, but not by her own will. She watched helplessly as her hand, no, the hand of the creature now inhabiting her body, turned the key in the lock. The door shut behind her with a definitive click. In the hall mirror, Laura saw her reflection smiling back at her, imprisoned on the other side of the glass, as the entity whispered through her lips, "Welcome to your true home, Laura. You've always belonged here, like all the Blackwoods before you." In the reflection, Laura silently pounded against the glass, her muted screams echoing only in the inverted world she now inhabited. Outside, the sun illuminated the faded sign near the entrance. Blackwood Estate, 1823. And in the mansion's windows, every reflection smiled in unison, even when their originals did not.